What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I am honored to introduce you all to Raytheon, ritual abuse, MK Ultra, secret space program, survivor, whistleblower, and overcomer, targeted individual, loving mother, nature lover, former Maine journalist and reporter, published writer and author, podcaster and podcast host of her own YouTube channel, flower essence and herbal extraordinaire, remote viewer, psychic and shaman, family court reform activist, and an amazing woman risking it all to blind the darkness with her light, Jane Hatch. In the shadowed corridors of America's technology highway, where gleaming industrial parks mask deep and underground horrors, Jane was forged in fire. Born into a bloodline laced with Pleiadian DNA and Nazi-collaborator shadows, Jane's destiny ignited before she drew her first breath. Her mother, a luminous Canadian immigrant with dual birth certificates, channeled Atlantean memories, spoke to plants, and prophesied UFOs amid the 1960s New England craze. Her father, a college graduate turned Raytheon salesman, ascended from middle class to yacht club elite after it's believed he potentially signed a clandestine contract that traded Jane for wealth and power. At age 4, or possibly earlier, Jane's abductions began. White vans prowled Hanover, Massachusetts South Shore, snatching gifted children under guises like Boston Pop's field trips. Jane vanished from school, entire years erased, classmates recalling her presence for mere days. Physically hauled, or 20 and backed, she endured Raytheon's subterranean layers beneath Needham's pristine suburbs. Electrodes split her psyche into altars, and waterboarding fractured her further. In the secret space program, in sterile white facilities, she served as an intuitive navigator, her trauma-forged psionics propelling UFO motherships. Jane fled at 16, but the aftercare intensified. She has been a targeted individual since her youth. Directed energy weapons, satellites, voice-to-skull technology, gang stalking, curses, demons, poison, accidents, homelessness, and even poverty have plagued her ever since. In Maine, whistleblowing Bath Iron Works corruption blacklisted her professional journalism career. Then corrupt family court tried her as a witch for prophetic dreams and exposing Bath Iron Works. Her 3 beautiful and precious daughters were seized, handed to a psychopathic stepmother, and likely subjected to the same MK Ultra tortures and programming Jane did everything in her power to keep them free from. Yet Jane rose. Shamanic journeys retrieved shattered soul fragments. Spirit horses carried her through the web of life to rescue her children's essences from Nazi clutches. Reiki mastery, herbalism, flower essences, and a Lesley University master's thesis on shamanism's healing power. She rebuilt as the bionic shaman. Remote viewing pierced the hidden veils, revealing the souls of lost boys under Raytheon, and even revealed her nephew potentially being used in the programs. A YouTube podcaster and podcast host herself on her own YouTube channel under her name, Jane interviews secret space program and targeted individual warriors, teaches shamanic and Reiki lessons in knowledge, offers long-distance healings, and reveals her remote viewing revelations. Passionate herbalist, nature whisperer, and river child reborn, she lives for her relationship with her daughters, crafts flower essences, and writes revelations. Jane is not a victim, but a cosmic avenger. She demands galactic courts honor breached contracts, shields envoys from elite deceit. Her light is enormous and unquenchable, proof that we are star-born, earth-allied, and invincible. In a world of mockingbird lies and polarized hate, Jane awakens us all to our true selves. She shatters chains and ignites sovereignty. The girl who knew too much now commands the stars, and she is calling you home. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, if you wanted to share any information privately with me, or if you are interested in submitting a written testimony to be featured in a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. I'm also on my 3rd YouTube channel, and it's live, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official. that I am now streaming new episode premieres from weekly. You can turn on your notifications and join our loving community in the live chats every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Time. Thank you on the other side of the screen wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me and to every guest on this show. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and whistleblower, fierce mama bear, warrioress, voice for the voiceless, passionate purveyor of truth, content creator, anti-child trafficking and survivor advocate, and walking miracle, the one, the only, Jane Hatch. Jane, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
You on. Your story just, it touched my heart in so many ways, seeing the depths of depravity that you've recalled going through, and then seeing you on this side where now you host your own podcast and you're writing books and you're finding ways to take the gifts that were once exploited by people who wanted to use them for dark agendas, and you're now shining a light on the world with them and helping people with them. So I know we have a lot to dive into today, but I was really thrilled to get to share your story with my audience. I think a lot of your story, it connects so many dots from these big corrupt institutions to government to even family court, and seeing sort of how this all works together and how this type of abuse and targeting, it never really stops in a survivor's life. It sort of evolves in different ways, and there's so many different aspects to it. So I thought maybe we'd go back to the beginning. You have a pretty interesting family history, especially with your parents and a few of your grandparents that you know of. And I thought maybe we could introduce your family lineage and what you know about it before you were born, and sort of paint the outline of the family that you were born into.
Okay, my father was from Bath, Maine, and it went back generations in Bath. Very English, and he left Bath when he was like 18 in a Model T Ford, I guess, and went to New York City. And he was very well educated. He went to Bowdoin. So that part of the family is very English, and for some reason they did very well. They were involved a lot of the construction of Bath, both the actual bricks and mortar and the engineering of the city. So they were sort of like outstanding citizens. They had a big house, and for some reason it stuck in my mind that somebody told me once that during the Depression they were able to redecorate. So I thought, what are they doing? That was serious, during that era. The people were in, bread lines. But for some reason they did okay. I don't know why. I didn't have a lot of relationship with them because I was the youngest child in my family. So generally the youngest doesn't really know the grandparents that much. But I only heard positive things about them. Very, like I said, very English. And the family had been in Bath for a couple of generations. And then my mother she was an immigrant from Canada, and they met in Boston at some sort of dance hall. They both loved to dance, and they married, and we were raised, most of us, in Hanover, Massachusetts. And again, I was the youngest of 4 of my parents' children. They were very different from each other. My mother was, like I said, I believe, had kind of a Pleiadian DNA. She was very connected to UFOs, during the 60s, during the UFO craze, where the Barney and Betty Hill, they saw the craft, and then they went all over. And so everybody started like UFO meetings in the suburbs of Boston. And she was going, and she often talked to me about Atlantis, and she remembered the end of Atlantis. And she was very connected to nature and flowers. And so that was sort of the beginning of my what I would call shamanic, understanding the love and power in nature and Mother Earth, came from my mother. And she was also a poet and a writer. And like you said, she had 2 birth certificates, and one said she was from Canada. She had parents in Canada, and one gave a German background. So we always, my oldest sister sort of knew secret knowledge because she was sort of the one that heard everything, not secret, but things, the rest of it. And she would always say that. And we're like, Mom's not German. And now that I'm aware of how Germans and German aristocracy was very much valued in MK Ultra mind control and the My Lab abductions, it makes more sense. Another unusual thing about my family is we were Christian Scientists, which worked for and against us in a way. We were never vaccinated. We never went. So I think it's made me very strong constitutionally. I've never had an illness, a major. We never took medicine until they left the church. And the other thing that was very good, I thought, for me, was we were taught that God was love. God was completely love, and we were a reflection of God, and so we were love, and that's why you couldn't get sick, kind of thing. Is the basis of Christian Science. You're perfection. We are perfection. But the downside was Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, did not believe in evil. She said evil did not exist. So that thought, that's a part of Christian Science. Is she believed that evil is the manifestation of human mind and human error. So it's a thought that's the evil, but the essence of human life and humans is love. So in a sense, she was right, but she was wrong, because it makes you very naive. Here I was suddenly immersed in the worst evils you can imagine. And I'm like, well, there's no evil. I must not be reading the Bible closely enough. And meanwhile, they throw me into, like, I'm in the worst evil imaginable. This is when things get dicey. After I was born, the fifth of her children, the fourth in my family, they were not doing very well financially. We were still Christian Scientists, but I don't know what happened. I don't know if I was born in a sort of rape situation, or I feel like there was sexual abuse after I was born. And I do have some memories of my father, because if you are MK Ultra, they're going to start to break you immediately, as you know, Emma, and everybody out there knows. So I believe so I don't know which came first, Raytheon or MK Ultra. I'm thinking Raytheon became a very big part of our lives, and that's when my father's wealth started to increase. And Raytheon was big in our community. We lived on Route 128, and that was called America's Technology Highway. That's where all the big tech companies were coming. Honeywell, IBM, Raytheon, everybody worked for them. So it became like a community, word that everybody passed around was Raytheon. And Honeywell, my neighbor worked for Honeywell, and Raytheon was getting very deep into my family. My uncle, when he retired, he was the lead engineer for Raytheon. He worked on the Minuteman missile. And my father eventually got big contracts from Raytheon, and he became a middleman. He was selling microchips and crystals and all of the things they're using now in targeted individuals. So at the time, it didn't mean a whole bunch to me. I was just looking at a chapter in my book. It's called Crystal Blue Persuasion, because that was my interpretation of crystals, was the healing crystals in the song. And I'm 13, and I'm at my father's office, which I abhorred for some reason. I didn't even know why. I couldn't stand it there, because they were all on the phone talking to Raytheon or Honeywell or MIT or Harvard. And I was like, this 13-year-old girl dressed like Twiggy and go-go boots and, fishnets, and had the transistor up to my head. And I'm just waiting. I'm probably trying to get money from my father or something to go get pizza. And I'm sitting there, and it was just common talk about Raytheon. But every time I heard the word, I had a disdain. And so this was in Needham, so I'm skipping ahead. So in Hanover, I believe the first 7 years, the abductions started to happen. And I didn't know it then. I only know it now, looking back and getting all the memories back. I didn't understand, like, talking to my friends in Hanover, nobody ever, like, I was seen once. I remember one day in school. I remember one thing one teacher said once. I asked a question. I said, does powdered milk come from cows? I think it was in third grade. That's the only thing I remember. And I remember she said, that's a very good question. That's like my entire memory. I remember once maybe riding my bike to school, and I just didn't think about it for years, why I didn't have memories of schoolmates at that time. And why wasn't I in photos? Why didn't people remember me out, playing in the recent? Maybe somebody did, but so that's, I believe, the time they started to take me.
And you had actually validated that by asking some former classmates / friends from childhood about it. And they too said, you're right, I don't remember you being there.
Yeah. Yes, my neighbors, the people that, the kids that lived on my street. I'm in touch with them all on Facebook, a lot of them from early childhood. And they would say to me, do you remember this, Jane? And I'd say, I just recently said, do you remember the dog shows you used to have in the barn? I'm like, no. And in all these, yeah. And this young man had bought me, like, I was 11, and he said he went to the department store and bought me a ring. He was a little boy who's had a crush on me. He said, do you remember me giving you the red ring? And I said, no. I said, I wish I had. He goes, you said you only wore it once and then you lost it. And then he said, maybe you just threw it away. I said, no, I don't remember. I don't. And it made me so sad. Like, I wasn't really present. And at a certain point, I don't remember my mother. It was all erased. I don't remember going to a store, bringing to school. I have pictures. I think she made me a homemade Easter outfit. So I have that picture. I'm like, okay, I was there. She was there. But I don't have memories. They erased because they didn't want me to remember her, because she would have had such a powerful influence on my healing. So it was during this time, I believe, I was picked up. Other kids were picked up or brought home. In fact, one of my neighbor's kids said they were picked up and brought home. They didn't fit the bill. I did, because of my mother and the psychic and telepathic skills she had in her Atlantean background. And I had all the telepathic and psionic skills. I didn't really know it at the time. I was mostly just immersed in nature. I knew the power of nature, because when they took her when I was 7 years old, they drugged her against her will and brought her by ambulance to a hospital. And she basically was never allowed to come home. So I went into complete shock, which is what they wanted.
Yes.
I know now. And my father was in alignment, and I could never understand. They were, somebody intervened in the whole family, broke us down. They stopped going to Christian Science. The family, I think I remote viewed my father signing a contract with Raytheon, turning me over, and I think possibly one of my brothers. I saw the contract. My father was kind of a naive Yankee kind of guy. He was egotistical, but also very naive. Like, he'd spent his whole life in Maine. He thought everybody was nice, good people. And he was always raving about Raytheon and what great people they were. And I saw him signing a contract. Now, my father's not evil, but I think they convinced him, like they do a lot of parents, through flattery. Oh, she's got skills. We're just going to, like, hold up a card and see if she can psychically. I didn't see that, but that's a feeling I got from the energy. There was 3 men in his office, and I know that office, and I know the drawer, and I know the desk, because I was in that room when I was a little girl. And the energy was oh yeah, this will be great. And so that was it. That was the end. He signed that contract. I don't really consider them binding contracts because they were, at this point they were done under manipulation and coercion. And so I think I was about 4 years old when he signed me over. And I'm guessing what happened was my mother at first might have thought it was okay. And then she figured out what was going on. And I remember her coming into the house and trying to rescue me in the middle of the night after they took her, and running down the stairs with me and out the front door. But then they would get me back. And I think she found out what was really going on, and she was in the way. They get rid of mothers, loving mothers. That's a big part of the book I'm writing now. Royal blood, royal blackmail is you've got to get rid of those loving mothers, or they're going to unwind the mind control, because kids will be able to get down to the root of it, or they're going to prevent it altogether. So they institutionalized her, which was really weird because we'd never been to doctors. I don't think she'd ever had a shot, but they gave her a shot to put her out and bring her to the hospital. She was medicated. And, God only knows what happened to her, because that was at the height of Ewan Cameron, the psychopathic psychiatrist that was the head of all psychiatry of Canada and then the United States. And he was using horrible, horrible methods especially on women in Canada and in the United States, of things like psychic driving and electroshock. And so God only knows what they did to her. But my father never let her come home. So they got her out of the way. They got me alone without protection. And I was sort of surrounded by predators. One of my half brother, my brother-in-law, there was I was completely surrounded by predators. And then a stepmother who was horrific. And so this was during the time that they were taking me, but I didn't remember it until the last few years. So I can tell you now what I think they were doing based on what I've seen recently, or we can continue on in this linear fashion.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. Before we do you mind if I ask just a couple questions about things that you already said? So obviously Raytheon, the technology highway, this whole era of this sort of technological boom in your area was a really big deal, but to you it was very normal. And you being in Massachusetts, where Raytheon is headquartered and began, I wanted to see if you could give a brief history of it. It comes up so much, but you don't hear too much about what it is. And so I thought maybe you would be a good person to share a little bit of the local history of what you've learned about it through living there, and then also having family that worked there. What is Raytheon and sort of their relationship to government, and even what you've been able to uncover about how they could possibly be tied in with MK Ultra?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll tell you my observations, as a child and a teenager. And I think I sort of went over them, that there was an excitement. It was like a gold rush, along, and all these suburbs became very affluent along the America's technology highway. And it was a 300-acre industrial park in Needham. It was the first in the nation, and it was built by this real estate Cabot, and God only knows, they're probably go back to the Rockefellers or something. But so I hated it. I when we moved to Needham, I immediately felt it when I was a little girl. I think I was 12 by the time we actually moved there from Hanover. And my whole feeling of the area was there was something wrong. And I would get on my bike and ride as far away as I could, or on my horse, and just to try to get away from Needham before I knew any of this. But from, the adults' perspective, this was a gold mine. People didn't have to go to factories, in a sense. My father would have ended up at Bath Iron Works. And they were doing all this computer work and being middlemen and engineers. And so and people were becoming affluent, very affluent in the 70s, And Raytheon, well, what I know now about Raytheon, because when I was a child, it was intuitive. I had a very bad feeling every time the word was mentioned. I didn't know it then. So now my research, it was a company founded in the 1920s by a German, not an Operation Paperclip scientist, Nazi, but German immigrants. Vannevar Bush. It was another Bush, German. So, you kind of know right off that maybe something's going to be going on. They started out, with very kind of innocuous, I don't know whether it was refrigerators or microwave ovens. And everybody thought they were great. And then they quickly got involved in defense missile construction and an organization, an operation called CHAMP, and they're very involved in directed energy weapons. Targeted Justice is an organization that fights for targeted individuals. They are charging Raytheon with treason right now and crimes against humanity. And, they've broken all these human rights. And they said Raytheon knows that they are involved in directed energy weapons against innocent civilians, on this watch list they have us on. They don't even have us on a normal list that anybody can see. And so probably their original goal was always directed energy weapons, because it was the Cold War by the 1950s, and that's what it was all about. And so they quickly evolved into weapons manufacturing. Now they're, other than Lockheed Martin, I think they're right up there with one of the top 5 weapons manufacturers in the country, and they are German owned. And I'm sure during Operation Paperclip, Nazi scientists were put at the head of their establishment. They were kind of innocuous because, they weren't Satanists, so to speak. They weren't, the Vatican. They weren't the military, although my family, there was ties to the Navy. My uncle was in the Navy. His son became a Navy officer. And so the Navy, my father wasn't necessarily, but I think he might have even gotten in through my uncle, who again retired as the lead engineer for Raytheon. And I don't know, my uncle always looked at me strangely, like I could never understand it because I'd never done anything to him. And I don't know, when he'd come to visit, and he would just like, I don't know, I felt like a leper, and I don't know why. And now I feel like maybe he knew and he was guilty. I don't know. I can't say that. And, I know his son would be very upset, my cousin, to hear me say that. But he knows that his father treated me strange. Everybody did. Everybody in my father's office did. And so anyway, so moving forward, Raytheon now, is there. There was a registered letter sent to Raytheon from Targeted Justice, accusing them of crimes against humanity and they listed all of the crimes they had committed. So they definitely became, I would say, a Nazi operation. And they were, I'm sure, involved with the Germans, the Nazis, and the military in the space race, supposedly against the USSR. Suppose everything was like we don't want the Russians to get there, but meantime, they're all collaborating together. The Russians, the Nazis. There's testimony that in some of these MK Ultra deep underground bases, there's generals from all the countries, China, Russia, Japan, like they're all in on MK Ultra because, they want to turn us all into slaves. So they're all interested in the advancement of this technology. So I was taken by Raytheon, I believe, in an underground base on the east side of Route 128, America's famous technology highway. I believe I've seen through remote view deep underground bases. I was taken to those, and I'm just getting my memories back. I believe I saw myself in like a dentist chair. It didn't sound like the Montauk. A lot of people who had survived Montauk's, this almost looked like it was a capsule in a plane or some sort of spacecraft with all kinds of instruments, not rudimentary, like a few. And there was 3 or 4 scientists in the room around me. I was looking down on me based on the body size, maybe 8, 9, 10, 11. And there was all these instruments in my head, and I couldn't feel it, but I knew they were, when in the remote view, I could not feel it. But I knew they were using electric shock and something in my throat, and my mind did split. They got an altar. And in that particular session, which they would have considered very successful, and you probably know people of a certain bloodline can split their brain instead of going insane. And that's what they're looking for, is people that will split their brain to survive into altars. So in that particular session, I saw an altar leave. This was remote view. And I went to a Stargate or something, a portal. And I was supposed to open. I knew I was supposed to open that Stargate or portal. And I don't know what I was supposed to. I did open it, and I did go through it, and I did end up somewhere. I believe it was Antarctica, but the remote view ended there. They didn't show me what I did there, but it was a very, very interesting experience with the Stargate. If it was a Stargate, because I've never seen one that I recall, I didn't open it even with telepathy, which I've become accustomed to using. They used my telepathy to operate ET technology, like the old German spacecraft. I was 4 years old. I had a relationship with the Stargate. And that's the only reason it opened, is it knew me or something. That's why I felt like I was having a conversation with something that knew me. And levers started to move and switch, and it was responding with kind of love or something, or memory of me, and that's why they couldn't do it. I kind of understood the thing knew me. It was animate. I mean, it was inanimate. I mean, it looked like a nickel or like a really, really advanced sort of steel, but super, super light. And it like just responded to a relationship, and it opened, and I was immediately sucked in and brought, I think it was to Antarctica. I have a feeling they were looking for secrets being or something going on up there, but I'll probably do another remote view, but anyway, they were using me to try to advance their understanding of ET technology. I don't know if I did time travel yet. I know somewhere along the line I had experienced SRA because I have flashes. I don't know where though. I don't know where or how, but again, I was so mind wiped. I don't know what they were using in the 60s, but it was very powerful technology to wipe your mind. So I have other memories of the way they were using me. Like I said, one was a small, like what we thought were ET saucers in the 60s, but was really Nazi technology. They were way ahead of us. But I remember sort of, I was not a pilot, but I could navigate with telepathy. Again, it was sort of like a relationship with seemingly inanimate objects that the ETs are very advanced at, is relationships with technology. Not like we see things as an object, like a toaster, like whatever. It's almost like the gypsies. They know that everything is animate, and they talk to them, and but much more advanced. So anyway, and then I know they used me in some horrible deep sea experiments. I think they were trying to see if people could survive at certain deep sea levels, or what sort of equipment they would need for pilots if they had to abandon a craft. So they used some of us children. They were just throwing us I just have memory, like, it looked like big, giant iron balls we were inside of it. And I've never, like, gotten over the shaking from that. I remember one shaman say, "Were you ever in like a freezer or something?" I'm like, "No, no, no." And that was, when I was younger, 35, 40. She goes, "I see you just shaking constantly." And now I know it was from, so they would use me for advanced stuff, but also like just as a nothing, like she might die, she might not, but we'll see. And I also saw that I was cloned, like, over and over and over, like dozens and dozens and dozens of clones they use my DNA for. So, let's see. Where are we? Okay, so I moved to Needham. My father, because he wants to, so they're taking me when I'm Hanover, and then we get to Needham, and they're taking, but I'm even closer. He's moved me closer to Raytheon, the industrial park, and it's just a skip and a hop over the highway from our house in Needham. And my mother had been gone for like 4 or 5 years at that point. I was with a horrific stepmother. I was being abused by a lot of men in my family. So, whatever trauma I was going through with Raytheon was being subdued with all the topical trauma. So it wasn't until I entered junior high that I started to have normal memories of my life. I think they stopped taking me when I turned about 13. I don't know. I'm thinking they did because they had enough trauma set up in my life that I wasn't going to remember. They had my stepmother, my half brother, a lot of people around. My father had changed by then. He had made a lot of money, but he was very cold to me. So I felt abandoned. I was just completely alone, which is how they arranged it. My only, solace was nature. I could still go into nature wherever I was and sit next to a tree. I think I brought from a past life, I think it was a Lakota Sioux medicine man. And so I had that natural ability to connect telepathically with nature and find power and love. I didn't understand the power until much later, but I understood the love. And I understood that the earth could heal me. And so when I had to scream and cry, it would be out in the woods because that was my only.
Your safe place.
Yeah, she was my mother at that point.
Oh my
so
goodness.
I started to go to school, and then I started to have memories of my life.
I want to talk more about that too. But speaking of school, you obviously were taken from school often, and sometimes under the guise of these sort of field trips and different things that you don't even have full memory of. And you came from a generational sort of psychic background where that ran in your family to some degree, at least to your mother, maybe even her mother or above her. Do you remember in school ever actually being tested for that? Did you enter gifted and talented programs, or were you recognized for it that you remember, and that's sort of why they pulled you? Or how do you think that they knew that you had these gifts?
Well, there is a theory that they track souls, especially souls that are going to cause them trouble. The deep state, the state Satanists, whatever you want to call them, the black nobility, the Roth, they will track souls who are coming in, that are being born. So it could have been something that esoteric, as they were tracking me to see, where I was going to be born. And then they would begin right away to position people in my life to traumatize me. And I would guess they gave me tests, but I have a blank. I think because if they were taking my next door neighbors, and he even told me recently that they got tested for something, but they were returned.
Okay.
So if they got tested, and they still live in this family still lives in the same house across the street from me. So he's known me since I was like 5 or 6 years old. And you remember saying, we all couldn't understand where your mother was, Jane. Why didn't you have a mother? Like, we couldn't understand it. And it's because it was very unusual, because it was like 1960, and so it was a very deliberate, because she, like me, was a loving, kind mother that, there was like what? So anyway, so if they got tested, I probably got tested. I just don't recall. I don't recall school at all, except for one day, 2 days. One school, I remember playing in the playground, pretending I was a horse. So I did that too. I was always pretending I was a horse, because I was either riding a horse in Hanover or pretending I was one. It was like my escape. I have a whole chapter in my book about riding this Appaloosa stallion through Hanover, just on a wild race, trying to get away from everything. So that was one memory. And then the other was just of asking that question. So I would like to do, a remote view. They did get my daughter through Gifted and Talented program. They got her, and they kind of have her and kind of don't, right? She's flourishing, believe me, financially. But anyway, I don't want to get into her too much, but they did, against my will, get her in Gifted, and stepmother got her in, because that was part of MK Ultra, on my oldest daughter, who was brilliant, really. And that's another whole story. That's in my book. And I've asked her recently, because I'm trying to suggest that she might want to remember some. And I said, do you remember Gifted Talent? She said, oh, it's nothing. Like, I think we just listened to something on headphones or something. It's so, like, not epidemic, but it's so common for all these people in Gifted and Talent. They don't remember.
Mm-mm.
I've learned that from watching your podcast. Oh, we just sat in a trailer and looked out the window and counted jelly beans. Like, like, how were they getting these? Were they drugging them the minute they got? I think they were, with the little fluoride pill or something, little pink pill or something. I don't know.
I don't either. It is very bizarre how that's very consistent. And then the memories that a lot of people do remember are very disturbing. Not 100% of the time, but they're very weird. Yeah. The things that people do remember, especially MK Ultra survivors, that they were being subjected to abuse or, torture or experimentation to exploit, psychic abilities. Or remote viewing is a huge one that I hear from a lot of MK Ultra survivors, that they were taken and used for remote viewing or different psychic abilities, which in a way you were also. It just was in a different environment potentially, even though maybe you just don't remember school, but you were still being used for that. And one of the other things I wanted to ask, actually, you mentioned interfacing with different craft and different technology, whether it was a Stargate or these UFO crafts that were way advanced for their time. Do you know at all, or did you overhear anybody ever mention the purpose? Why? I know you said you had this kind of relationship that you could do different things, but what was the purpose of what did they want from you to do with these craft? Were they looking for a specific outcome for you to accomplish, or were they just generally watching how you interacted to see if it would interact back with you?
I think that was part of it. I think since the Roswell crash, which they first, I think that was 1940s, they had moved the time travel chair from that vessel to Montauk, but there was great interest in it because they found out it was ET technology, and they also found out there was only ETs or certain human children that could navigate it. And that became on steroids, trying to find those children. My feeling was, I'll tell you this, which I don't understand at all. I feel like I was dropping bombs from UFOs, German UFOs. So I felt like it was dangerous, and I was like, they're just using me in case anything happened. And I don't know if it was, I don't remember pressing a button and a bomb drop. I just remember going through the sky and there was bombs dropping out, and in like UFOs aren't necessarily armed that I'm aware of with any, they must be, but I don't know whether it was testing. It could have been testing for like military purposes to find out, because we're in the pretty early stages of creating the missiles, and they were using me to learn how to use ET technology in the the race for ET technology. And they're all using it for war and power and whatever would give them more money, more power, more slaves, more DNA, maybe off world. I do have a memory on Mars with James Rink. They're all just coming back in these strange, but I was on Mars when I was older. I like, I don't know, like an older teenager. That's another memory with James Rink. Whatever they wanted it for power over somebody, or to be able to advance in the space, the space war, not the space war, but the race for technology and property on all these different planets. And they always say it was, again, they didn't want the Russians to get it, but I think they were all working together against us, all the leaders of the world, and they still are,
yeah, that would make a lot of sense. Were you also used for remote viewing? I know you're very gifted at that still to this day. Do you remember if
yeah, I probably was. Like I said, I am just getting back memories. Like I'm just, what I've told you, I think is the tip of the iceberg. I think I might have even been used for breeding on Mars, because if I had German blood and they didn't have, I think at a certain time, the wars that reduced their population, and they were breeding, they wanted more humans on Mars, and if I had German blood, that's their preference. I actually think that's sort of what James Rink rescued me from. It's a brief story. I don't know if you want to hear it or not.
Yeah, you can share it.
It's not okay. So I remember I was in a wagon lying down. It was night, like an old rickety kind of wagon wood, and I was lying down aside. I remember I was young, a teenager maybe, or 20, and we're barreling down a mountain, and I'm like, I didn't know it was a mountain. I felt like I was barreling. I looked up, and I was being pulled by someone on a motorcycle, and it was James Rink. And he's barreling down the mountain, and I'm looking over the side, and it's straight down. But I didn't care. I remember feeling like, I don't care if I die, like whatever, I don't care. So I wasn't that scared because I didn't care. And we're just going around until finally we got to the bottom. I don't know yet where he got me from, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to remote view it. We got to the bottom, and I got out of, he held my hand. Like, we were friends. So he knew he was like rescuing me. I don't know how he knew me. And I didn't know him for sure, but I knew he was safe. I knew he was an ally. I knew he was rescuing me from something. And I'm thinking it might've been a breeding facility. So we get down, we're at like this quaint little German village. I'm not kidding, on Mars, like, European houses with flower boxes with geraniums in them, like a little cute little street. And I'm like, oh, I had the sense we're safe. And he helped me out of the wagon, and we're just standing there. And I had a sense we were going to go in and we were going to be protected in there until we made our next step. And that was the end of that memory. So, and that's when I was, that could, it could have been a clone that I was remembering too. That because we are our clones. I mean, we're our clones. We feel what they feel. So I think they used my DNA quite a bit too. And that would make a lot of sense if I had any German blood. I'm still not sure of that, but it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That's really interesting. You do have a lot of memory for just recently understanding the duality of your life and tapping into the memories that you were programmed to forget. It's amazing what you've been able to connect to your family, to your life, to the companies and institutions around you, that you've been able to identify some people, and even some places you can hypothesize, like how you said you believe that you were underground at Raytheon under a tunnel, in sort of this underground dumb area. And so it's really amazing what you've been able to recover in such a short time. And I'm sure it's just the tip of the iceberg. And the more that you keep going, you're going to keep gaining momentum and, remembering more. Yeah. So far, do you remember any other locations that you were taken? Was it always right sort of in your hometown area? Do you remember being taken anywhere else? And then also, do you recall, and you don't have to name names if you don't want, but I know you've mentioned people in lab coats are around you. Did you ever connect a name to any of the faces or figure out who some of these abusers were in your life?
Do you mean the scientists in the deep underground base, or
any of them?
Not yet, but there's people that look familiar when I see them now. Yeah, in fact, I think I might have seen the founding person of Raytheon. His face looks, it's like a gut instinct. You feel repulsed for no reason. I think I have not been wanting to look at those faces yet. But they're slowly coming back. The scientists, so-called scientists, I didn't see their faces because I was looking remote view down. And when I was a child, it felt like there was so much they were doing to me. I couldn't even see. But I wonder about certain people in my family, that I have a revulsion towards, that, and I've mentioned them, and I'm not going to mention them again, but I don't know. I'm just beginning. I think there's something about the royal family. I don't have any memories, but I have an incredibly close connection to Princess Diana. In fact, I'm writing a book about her, and that she was used in MK Ultra, believe it or not. She was used. Yeah, I have the whole story from a woman that was one of her best friends. It's like I can't. It's like we have to do a whole podcast about it. She was used for to serve the military elite, and she was used at World Economic Forum in her role as the goddess. The men like to unlock their favorite goddess, sex queen. She was the goddess, and whoever wanted the goddess, Diana, after the actual, who I named one of my daughters after too. I have a Diana after the princess. I named her after the princess. Aww. My youngest daughter is Diana. And this is one memory I've had for a long time. This is like the weirdest thing. I remember being in one of those vans. They were bringing me somewhere, and there was like a few kids. And I remember telling like, yeah, I'm like 13th in line for the crown of England. And I think back, I think I was one of those, like, I was just so insecure, and I was trying to build myself up, and I'm like, why did I say anything? I'm like in this weird little town in Massachusetts, completely, But like then throughout my life, and I am not, but I'm like, why did I even mention? I thought when I remembered it is because I just wanted to feel better about myself,
Mhm.
you know, that I didn't have a mother and I didn't have a family and I was alone. And I told somebody in that van. And also, why did I remember that? Like, it's a weird thing to remember. And now I'm writing a book about her. I think I might have somehow been involved in that sex trafficking to military elite like Diana. I don't know. I don't know, but I don't know yet. But they would have definitely been, you don't just get used, you know, telepathically, or you're just an instrument to them to achieve whatever they want. And you know, I was probably feel like I might have known her from those programs somehow. But you're not allowed, you know, to talk. And so yeah, so I don't know how we got on that, but I'm just getting back. And I don't have any memories, you know, like Elizabeth Barron and all these people that have been trafficked to the royal family, not Elizabeth, Rebecca, to the royal family. I do not have those memories, but I am deeply, deeply involved in research of them right now. That's the focus of my book, is the royal family and what they did to Diana. It was much worse than anybody knows. She was MK Ultra and being used as a sex slave to cut deals at World Economic Forum. And it's a hard thing because people don't want to see her in that role. I mean, she didn't want to see her. And I have a testimony from this man, Declan, who was also a victim of what he called the Luciferian cult, which involved Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher and Jimmy Savile. And he was at Buckingham Palace and he saw her being MK Ultra'd. And I put that in there's an eyewitness to her being when she was 19. And you've probably interviewed other people that have mentioned Princess Diana, I think, Emma. Or maybe it was another podcast, but there's other people that have seen Diana in that world of sex trafficking.
It makes sense, seeing as though the family she ended up in, that there was probably a reason why she ended up there. It probably wasn't just this random goody two shoes girl meets Prince Charming and falls in love and gets in this family. There was probably a curated pathway that she was made to take that led her there. Sounds like you're kind of on the track of uncovering that.
Yeah. Well, this woman, Elizabeth Wallace, who's a major part of my book, who was actually a bloodline daughter of Queen Elizabeth, you know, they breed their own children for trafficking, and she was one of them. And that's how she knew Princess Diana, because they were together often being trafficked at World Economic Forum. Well, I lost my train of thought. What did you just say? Because I was going to say something about Princess Diana.
Just that her path seems very curated and not natural.
Oh, yeah. So Elizabeth Wallace said they knew the moment she was born that she was going to marry Prince. It's all arranged with these elite families who they're going to sacrifice and why. And when she was born, they knew she was going to be sacrificed, given to Prince Charles, have the children, and then she was going to be executed, assassinated on that date and that time, and pregnant, because they were reenacting the Osiris, Isis, the other crazy Egyptian ceremony. And she had to be pregnant. And Elizabeth said she knew she was pregnant because Diana told her she was pregnant. So this is like a mind-blowing amount of information, and it's all going into the book, but somehow I'm tied in. I'm not related to them, but you know, I don't know why I ever said that, except for I think I had low self-esteem. But maybe I knew Diana back then. I don't know. I mean, they can traffic you all throughout the world in underground tunnels in, you know, an hour. And so I don't know if I want to know the rest of the story, because life is a little bit better right now. But if I can change the world or help anyone or because we have to wake up. This world is under mind control, not, Operation Paperclip brought in 50,000 Nazi scientists, placed them all in leadership positions in all these strategic companies. And now it's a cancer that's taken over the Nazi agenda. And I think we're under deep capture, the entire country. Why else would we be living in such an insane world, right?
Right. Yeah. And, just uncovering all this, it's scary for society to consider the duality just of our world. Everybody's grown up with these rose-colored glasses. And even though they know they might feel the world isn't right, they still hold on to the hope that authority's going to save us and everything's good. And we're being protected by people in power and the courts work to our benefit and we're all safe, and there's no secrets in the world. It's all out here for us. And it can be really hard for people to contend with these realities that you and others talk about. And I think one of the biggest things that society doesn't do is take into consideration whenever they're listening to a testimony like this. It's easier to just turn it off because it's an uncomfortable truth. But imagine being forced to contend with it, like you waking up and having memories one random day when you're just living your life that, oh my gosh, this happened to me and this happened to me and this is horrific. And it's never good what you and others remember. It's life shattering. It's horrific what is being remembered. And so I think too, we have an obligation to learn these hard truths. The truth is really painful whenever you first contend with it, but it sets us free in the end, and it's not comfortable to learn it. But whenever you do, there's that painful period, almost like having a breakup or losing somebody, where it's life shattering in a moment, for those of us who didn't grow up how you did, because you realize the world isn't what we thought. But then all of a sudden it's like, wait, well, if now I know the truth and I've been led wrong and I've been depending on all these things that aren't going to save me and that aren't dependable and don't have my best interest in mind, well, what can I do to help? What can I do in my community? Who can I get in my corner to help? It's almost empowering, where you can now sort of take the lead in your life instead of giving your power away to people, and your story is a true testament of that, of how for so long you felt unaligned with certain things. You had bad feelings around the area that you grew up in. You'd go walk anywhere on that highway area and just, feel icky and not aligned. And so in a way, it's so life-shattering to, find all this out, but it also has to be relieving in a way to know that you weren't just imagining things, that those
it's really empowering. Like, yeah. I knew I couldn't see. No one told me, and everyone around me was feeling something different, but I knew. And now I know I was right. I was right all along, and I'm not crazy, and I'm not overly sensitive. Like, I can feel the truth. And that like empowers you in other ways too. So now if I feel something, I go, well, it's right. It's probably right. Because I was right all along when everyone was telling me I was whatever they told me I was, basically just ignoring me, or, you just start to lose your self-esteem and your perspective and your belief in yourself. You lose the belief in yourself. But now this returns it. As painful as it is, it returns your belief in your perspective and your intuition. So that's the empowering part.
Yes. And so you had, like you said, in your early teenage years, you actually started that process. It might not have been everything that you know now, but you started the process of reclaiming your memories and not having as much lost time and life from a memory perspective, and from what you were experiencing started to level out a little bit, where you became more conscious of your life and what you were doing. Can you talk a little bit about those years? What changed, do you think? You mentioned you think that you weren't being used, at least not as much during that time, but what sort of transpired in your life at that period?
Well, it wasn't a nice time in my life, but I believe they stopped taking me. And so I started to have day-to-day memories. I lived with a horrific stepmother who was just absolutely horrible and cruel. And so that took the place of the abductions. It's the aftercare. They make sure they position you with somebody. I did, gain friends. I always had friends. people seemed to gather around me, whether it's junior high. I skipped school a lot. I started to go into depression and PTSD around that time. I had severe panic attacks started. I can remember being in my room at 40 Dunster Road in Needham, Mass. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but and I had this black and orange wallpaper, and remember it looked like it was bleeding, and I thought someone had given me acid or something, and it hadn't. I was having my first severe panic attack. So things didn't get better, believe me. They just switched over. I was drugged. I experienced rape from my stepfather and incest, because my mother, of course, connected up with a demonic individual who was a pedophile and an alcoholic. So I could not rebond with her, because she returned to my area, but I couldn't see her. Or I tried to, I would be molested. So I believe he was positioned in her life too at that point again. And I think she'd also been through MK Ultra, so she didn't know what she was doing. And so instead of, Raytheon or the military, the Nazis, I had a abusive stepmother. I had abusive relatives, males, step blood and non-blood. I had a boyfriend, and that was just, at this point, I think he was my handler. He was Navy. He's Navy now, Navy commander. But he was just everywhere. I never thought this until a few years ago. But he would show up throughout my life, wherever I was, and I'd think, how the hell did he know where I was? But I was so under mind control, I didn't know what to do. But so I met him when I was 14, and he was supposedly my boyfriend. He gave me, whatever, rings, and it's going steady, and let me use his car, which was cool. It was a Corvette. It was white, convertible. So I was driving around Needham with the top down in a Corvette. I probably look like the quintessential, suburban blonde with money. I did look like that, because my father was making money from Raytheon. So, and I had a boyfriend, with a Corvette, and but things were going downhill really, really quickly with my mental health. So I was having my first anxiety attack. My father gets out Christian Science and Health, and he starts reading Mary Baker Eddy, that evil does not exist, and all this stuff. And I almost lost my mind at that point, because they even use Christian Science to treat mental health disorders. And so, and then my stepmother just hated me and made my life miserable. And my father was sort of abandoning me, because now he had this new life, and he was in a yacht club. And I was just a reminder, I think, of everything that he shouldn't have done to me and my mother. And, he was going to Europe, and he was just, living this great life. And then they tried to dump me at my mother's, and they knew my stepfather was abusive, but they still tried to dump me. And then I just ran away to Maine. I went to Maine at 16. I went to Maine.
Did you go all by yourself, or did you have somebody to go with you?
Kids I met at the beach, like people I didn't really know.
Oh my gosh.
Just people. Guy looked like Charles Manson, but I'll tell you, anything was better than my stepmother.
Oh.
And that was a disaster. I went like way up in the woods in Maine and worked at a bar. Oh my God.
What was the reaction from your stepmother and father?
Well, my stepmother was always thrilled when she got rid of one of us. My father didn't say anything. He was so ineffectual and weak, and he didn't do anything. But there was one point I burned down a house, and I was in it, but I got out. And I had been drinking extremely heavily. Like, believe it or not, I think I was walking around with a bottle of wild turkey half the time. I was a because everything was coming up, the PTSD is just like, I don't know how so anyway, lo and behold, my boyfriend from high school shows up to rescue me. The one that was the commander in the Navy, recently retired. So he shows up. I call my father and I said, I think I got to get out of Maine. I hadn't talked to him in like a year. I said, I'm going to go with you, UMass, Amherst. So I knew I was on a runaway train. I was going to die somehow from alcohol or, abduction or something. And I'd literally set a house on fire. Like I went to sleep drunk and I left a candle going. Geez, I didn't know we'd be getting into this.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I was drinking. So arrived. Oh, I shouldn't say his name. So yeah. And this is the first time I publicly called him out as a handler. First time ever. So he brings me to UMass. I shouldn't say all this about him, but anyway, I ended up going to college and I'd barely been to high school. I got a GED and I just started taking classes that I loved. Well, first I just started taking writing classes like screenplay, and I took art classes. You could take them, without being enrolled, because I didn't have any I was just like gone all the time. I don't know. I had a few days in school. I was skipping school when I was at school. I was just wandering around. I was getting on trains and going to Boston. I was just a complete lost soul as a teenager. Other than the times I had his car and I had a group of friends, I was lost, and they knew it. They felt bad for me, but where was I? So, oh yeah, I burned down the house. He came and rescued me, brought me to Amherst, Mass, where he was going to school. So I lived with him, started taking classes in writing, which I loved, and I also got back into equitation. There was an equitation Morgan dressage minor you could do there. They had a whole Morgan farm of horses, not a farm, but a stable. And so that kind of saved me, was just being around horses and nature, kind of. And then I got a GED, and then I graduated. I drank my way through, but it was controlled. And my mother was coming out to see me, but I couldn't even relate to her because there was so much trauma. She was trying so desperately. And she would come out, and I was in a sorority of all. I don't know how I got into a sorority, because I'm not a sorority person, but I don't know. And then, so I did eventually get a degree there, and then I ended up. So I did an internship in Needham. I went back to Needham as a reporter for the Needham Times. And that was like my final semester. And my father just treated me like shit. I don't know why. They wouldn't even let me live with them. Everyone else in town was like, "Oh, Jane, I love your stories. I'm reading your stories. You're such a great reporter. Oh, I love your photography." They wouldn't even talk to me. And I'd done nothing to these people. And I literally think I finally had a nervous breakdown. And it was that. It was his total and complete rejection of me. When I had actually had an opportunity to go to New York City to a big paper, and I went to Needham instead because I wanted him to see me and be proud of me. Again, why was I treated like this? I don't know, unless he had enormous guilt. So, I went up to Maine during this. I went back to Maine at the end of college and during the internship, and I was just hanging out at the beach, and I met a lifeguard. And at the end of my internship, he showed up in a Corvette, another white Corvette, And I just left with him and went and lived with him in Maine with his family, because I was just lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no family, no money, no home. I had nothing. I had no family. My family I don't know. I just had no family. And so here's, he was a nice guy, said he was in love with me. He was. I still talk to him. We're still friends. And so I went and lived with his family. And that, it's funny how we sometimes think our escape is our imprisonment, because Maine became a horrible prison for me. And it was a military move. I was ushered up to Maine. And I was eventually placed right in the center between Brunswick Naval Air Station, Bath Iron Works, shipbuilders who were the number one builder of the Arleigh Burke destroyers, nuclear armed Navy ships. I got planted right between these military fractions. So then, John and I eventually broke up, and I got married to another guy, and we had 2 children. And that's when, and then we got divorced, and I was a reporter, and I was a whistleblower, and I really picked the wrong enemies, even though they were already my enemies. I didn't know. I went up against the Navy, Bath Iron Works, Maine Yankee Nuclear, and I was reporting about environmental pollution and what they were doing to Tarbox Hill and this chemical called Black Beauty they were spreading all over southern Bath. And so me and my big mouth, and I had a job as a reporter, and they were publishing all my stories. The Kennebec Journal. I was their coastal reporter, and they were in Augusta, and I kept writing, and they kept publishing. And I was calling out the biggest private employer in Maine. And then one day it just came to a dead stop. They shut down the Coastal Journal, the part of the paper. Someone drove by my house and shot a gun at it. The president, Haggett, who died recently, I saw him at a yard sale. He goes, "I heard you were writing a screenplay, Jane." This is the president of the company. I was speechless, because in the screenplay, I had revealed they were using faulty ship parts. It wasn't the main part of the story. The main part of the story was the first woman draftsman at Bath Iron Works. It was like a Silkwood story. It was about a woman who I had reported for, a sexual harassment. And then she told me her story. But he knew about that. And I think that's the moment I officially got on the target. I think Haggett put me on the targeted individual list. I had worked for him for a month as a secretary, and he had made advances, and I had said no. So I was like the perfect witch. Like I was refusing sexual advances. I was outspoken. I was doing it was like the perfect storm for them to put me on the targeted. So that's when my life completely went to hell. Absolutely. Like I thought I was living hell before. I thought I knew hell. I didn't know hell. Even with MK Ultra, even with my stepmother, that was nothing compared to what they put me through.
And you're not alone. People who have listened to this podcast have heard over and over and over and over and over again, every country in the world, every continent, every city, we're really conditioned to think that courts are there to bring justice, that people do the right thing, the right people step up and help them achieve the goal that they want, prosecution or justice or whatever it is, compensation. But really, that's not how this works. There's an intelligent system woven in, sort of like how we have a shadow government. There's a shadow court system. We're shown one way that it works through TV and media and movies. And on the back end, there's a system, there's a group that works to hide crime instead of bring justice to it. And they penalize good people to keep their secrets hidden, including good parents trying to protect their children from these networks of predators, pedophiles, and abusers. And a lot of them end up working in the court system to help manage the or sort of have an oversight of the crime that gets reported and how to stop that from reaching the public, how to silence mothers, how to take the children away so that way they don't have a relationship and they can't be free. The children end up getting, trafficked to a pedophile. So you really see how the courts operate from a perspective of involving children and parents as a child trafficking racket. And it's horrifying, and how many Freemasons work as lawyers and judges that we hear about in these different testimonies. And, just the overlap of the satanic cult secret society side of this, as well as MK Ultra, into the court system, and that all that garbage is in there, and that we're depending on a system that is covering up crime to bring justice to it, and it's horrific how people like you are treated for doing the right thing, for being a protective parent, and all of a sudden you're being gaslit and having, the most precious things in the world taken from you. And it's just amazing how many stories there are like this. But because the public is conditioned to watch TV and to think that courts are there to bring justice, the good person that gets persecuted for doing the right thing is also gaslit to the public. The public thinks, oh, they must not be a good parent if they didn't get custody. And it's like, you have no idea how this works. And it's just so backwards and inverted from what we know. But it's such a pandemic when you hear about how many hundreds and thousands of these stories everywhere all over the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's the norm. I think during, Operation Paperclip, when they brought the 50,000 plus scientists over here, or leaders, they were placed in all the major systems, and one of them was the legal. We do not have an American legal system. We have a Nazi system right now. If you look at the end results and how, children, good parents are being punished and bad parents are being rewarded. If you can get a child into the system to be used by the pedophiles, the judges, the lawyers, the therapists, they become a cash cow. And the protective parents just get in the way. That's why all these psychopaths and pedophiles and, criminals are getting their children, is because they share them with all these criminals, including the judges, all the way down to the police. There's one horror story after another in Maine. It was, mine being one of them, and mine not ending up as horrific as some of the others. The process was horrific and 10 times worse than anything I'd ever been through. I didn't even know this level of torture existed. I didn't know people, judges did. I didn't know. But we are still alive 30 years later. And not all the women and children that went through the Maine court system are still alive. They have died and been tortured to death. So, and a big part of our survival was shamanism. I was able to, it's, the story. I don't know if I want to go into it. I mean, I can touch on it. They wanted my daughters, they wanted their bloodline. I think they wanted to sex traffic one of them. The other one they wanted to use in the deep state in politics. And, there was definitely alliance between the judge and Haggett and the guardian ad litem, the therapists. My daughters were desperate to be with me, and they condemned them, called them codependent, said they beat them down. I mean, the love never died. The love did not die. But basically, these people trafficked my daughters to a psychopathic stepmother, and the judge knew she was a deviant because there was one therapist on my side. She was a PhD, Nancy Coleman. I will never forget you, Dr. Nancy Coleman. She knew what she was going up against, but she stood by my side. She wrote a 20-page letter, stood up in court and said, do not give these children to that stepmother. Do not. She's abusive, and the children are being abused. He completely ignored it, made an order that, and the only thing I wanted was my daughters to be with me when their father was out to sea, merchant marine, gone 5 to 6 months at a time. What judge in his right mind doesn't say, of course, they're with her mother? He ordered them to be with the stepmother even after this report and I had half the town show up to defend me. He wouldn't see them. They stood outside. He wouldn't see them. They could not find anything on me because I was sort of an outstanding citizen. Everyone loved me. Everyone loved my children. So they decided to try me as a witch, basically. And they said, the Guardian said that one of my daughters said that I had a dream of tidal waves. And they actually put this in the Guardian's report. And that I felt like there was a negative triangle between Bath Iron Works, the shipyard, and the Navy base, which you don't have to be psychic to know that. This was actually in a Guardian's report in 1990, basically trying me because they could find nothing else as a witch and using my daughters. Doesn't that sound like the Salem witch trials where they used children to testify? And they will not release those records to this day because they know how illegal. They also, in the custody, they said it was shared, because if they had said that, this is what the Guardian, I said, their father's gone 6 months of their year. You're going to leave them alone with an abusive stepmother? And the Guardian said, well, he has a fax machine on the ship. He can run his household from a fax machine in Alaska. And the judge is going on. At that point, this is a complete setup. They're trafficking my children. They're absolutely going to traffic them. And they did. And, it's been 30 years and I still feel the pain deeply. And, I'm just holding it together now. It's still hard to talk about it. Every single day of my life is healing. My daughters, every single day of their lives, they're still healing. But I will tell you, I think the stepmother was getting ready to kill one of my daughters, and she knew it, and I knew it, and I was getting signs from the universe. She was abusing them, sexually abusing them, mind control, not feeding them, not giving them medicine, putting them in a third floor. And we had lived in this glorious, beautiful Victorian home. They just had the most beautiful, amazing life with friends and family and beauty and writing. And they went into this fucking hellhole. And they lived in this third floor walk up that was not safe. And of course, if I would call the fire department, they would just blame me, everybody. So it was like, the more what the judges do is the more you try to rescue your children, the more your children are punished. That's how they destroy the mother's care. Is you begin to see, if I call her, the mother's not going to feed her dinner. If she comes to the phone, and she agrees to see me, she won't get to go to a birthday party. So love becomes just like MK Ultra. If you love, you're punished. Somehow my little daughter stood up to all of them. She was only a little girl and everyone was against her. All of them. And if I went to anyone to report their abuse, they would say I was paranoid, I was crazy, I was jealous. And so I stopped reporting it. And
you just get gaslit.
I just got gaslit. And then they get punished more. And so I don't know how, we survive it, because their children are right there and you can't get them and you can't protect them and you can't. Because anytime you try to do anything, they call you crazy or insane or jealous, because they all want these children to traffic them. And so I had a dream one night that the house they were living in burned to the ground. And I knew like something awful was going to happen. I knew like my daughter had called me and she had whispered and she said, Mom, I think Linda's going to kill me. And I knew this woman, her last name is the last name of one of Hitler's right-hand men. I know, and she looks exactly, was a Nazi operation, and I'm not exaggerating. And so I had been training as a shamanism. I'd saved myself with shamans had gone and retrieved my soul pieces that had shattered across Maine from the amount of trauma. I had trauma after trauma. Every single day is trauma when you go through family court. Every hour sometimes. And so I was completely shattered. So I wanted to die, and that's what they wanted to do. And I said, if I do that, they're going to tell them I was never a good mother, that I abandoned them. I'm not going to die. And so I had shamans like returning my soul. And like half of, all the healers were healing me and bringing back my soul. And so I was getting stronger, and I had learned to be a shaman. I had been born a shaman, really. I knew how to do this. And so I had no resources. Remember, I can't call anyone. I can't call the police. They'll say I'm crazy. They'll probably put my daughter in a detention center and me in a mental institution. That's what I was up against in this town. And so I'm like, okay, she's going to kill her if I don't do it. Like, so I gathered up all my spirit guides, like from past lives when I was close to all my Native American. I had the whole spirit world on my side. That's what I did have. Like the spirits of the trees, the spirits of the flowers, all the universe rallied behind me that was good. All my spirit guides, all my power animals, my ancestors. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just gathering power and gathering power and power and power. And then I went, I said, I'm going. So I had a spirit horse, and I went with all these ancestors in power animals. And we basically went to the house where they were living. And the spirit guides and the ancestors, they started to tear there were demons in the house. There was energy. I could see the MK Ultra. I could actually see it. I could see all the ties to demons. I could see her demonic energy. So at that moment, that night, the stepmother and my husband had gone, just left the girls, literally put boards on the house, never told me, left them alone. They're about 13, 14, something like that. So they were alone. So we went in, all the spirits, and they just started releasing all these ties and all these demons and all these attachments and bringing back soul pieces to them. So they were releasing them from the ties of the stepmother and all the people, energetically. We were cutting cords, we were depossessing. They were literally breaking windows, metaphysically breaking. Like, it wasn't happening at that time, but it was happening on the spirit, where they were tearing off and then I was on this horse. This is it here, actually. And this is what it looked like. So I held out my hand to them in the spirit form, and they reached back and they took my hand, because thankfully they still had trust. And they got on the back of the horse with me, the spirit horse, because they knew I was a shaman, so they believed it. And we rode back, and I fell asleep. And I felt like something had happened, though. I felt like I had done something. I had really, really done something. So I fell asleep, and maybe for the peace, for the first time in 5 years. And then the next day, the night of the next day, somebody called me from Bath, and they said, Jane, you got to get over here. Something's happening in that house. where your daughters are. Like, people were so afraid to go with stepmother. They would like have to call me in secret. And so I went to the house, and it was like filled with teenagers who were tearing down the boards like we had done the night, and they were smashing windows. And my daughters and everybody was running out the door, and there was all these teenagers, and they were rocking this police car, and they were saying, "Set the children free. Set the children free." And I'm standing there watching it. I'm going, oh my God, this is what we did last night. We set the children free. Like, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew something had happened. And so all these kids, my daughters had this huge party, and they just were set free. Like, they didn't have the demon, and they just ran. Everybody ran. All the kids ran, and they never went back. They got free. My daughters never went back. They were set free. I was sitting in the back seat of the cruiser with one of my daughters. She was drunk. They had gotten drunk and just gone crazy, which was the aftermath of being released. And so it was not easy after that, and it was 30 years of healing from the torture. It's been 30 years. But that was the power of the shamanic journey. And the love that we shared for the first few years we were together, and the beauty and the joy never left them. They know everything I did to survive. And I have to say, they adore me. They love me in every day of my life, they tell me. And we are so lucky, because there's other mothers and children that died in the same process, and they were going through the court. A little girl, Mila, was trafficked through the court, taken from her mother. They just said because she was immature. I'm going to say it now. Mila Logan was stolen from her mother, Christy Marr, because they said Christy was immature, which she wasn't. And they placed her, little Logan, she was only 5 years old, with a Maine social worker, Sally Schofield. The judge placed her. They started trafficking Logan right away, the social worker. And Christy got a couple of hours a week with her daughter. And when she did, Logan told her what was happening to her. She tried to tell her mother. Logan, the mother, went back to the judge, and the judge says, if you report one more time the abuse of Sally Schofield, our social worker, you'll never see your little girl again. And she never did, alive. Sally Schofield killed Logan Marr in Maine at the same time my daughters were going through family court. She duct taped her and suffocated her to death. And Sally Schofield was arrested. She only served 17 years. But like I said, we survived. And Logan didn't, and Christy, of course, died. She couldn't. They gave her back Logan's body, but she never got to see her daughter again because she was reporting abuse. And that's how MK Ultra works. And I'm really, really sorry if I got too deep into this, but it's a reality, and it's the norm. It's the norm that's happening all across the West. And I think it started with Operation Paperclip. And we survived, and, we lost years and years and years, but we survived. And, and BBC did a special on it. You can see it. It was called The Taking of Logan Marr, and they've banned it in this country, but you can see it in other countries. You can imagine banning it. But BBC did a special on it, and they were going through the court system the same time we were in the 80s and 90s. So, that was deeper than I thought I was going to get into that, Emma.
What a miracle that you now get to share a relationship with your precious daughters. It doesn't make up for the lost time, but I'm so happy that they didn't get further taken from you, because that's the other thing that happens, right? There's the first step of separation.
Yeah.
Then there's the time away, whether it's 1 month or 30 years. The cult and the people involved with the MK Ultra and with the, organized abuse network, they work overtime to brainwash the children to not ever want to talk to the parent again. And so even if all and everybody survive the years of torment of being kept apart, once there's an opportunity to come together, a lot of times the children don't even want anything to do with their mom, because they're like, oh, mom's bad. I've been told all these years mom is bad. I never want to talk to her. And I feel so horrible for those parents who just
that's the second step, is the brainwashing. Yeah. And
but your girls knew enough from you that they never could forget. They could never shake that off, and nothing could penetrate that bond that you had with them. And that's a testament to you. And so they're so lucky that they had a mother who was going to fight for them and who loved them so unconditionally that they never fell prey to all the programming, all the brainwashing, all of the conditioning. That was meant to take them from you forever.
And that's why I think the stepmother was going to kill her, and she could have and gotten away with it, because everyone in the entire town was brainwashed, because she could not get control over my youngest daughter, and it was driving her out of her mind. And she could have easily thrown her out the window. I mean, and the police would have gone on her side, and because that's the way the whole system was lined up. And I think that my older daughter became more compliant, so she didn't get the kind of torture my youngest did, who would not align with any of them. And she was so little and so alone, and her father wouldn't believe her, and he wouldn't believe me, and he wouldn't believe anybody, and she was just completely alone. But she never broke completely. And that is the second step. They're not done when they get the mother physically away. Then they have to get her mentally and emotionally destroyed.
And then they take your finances too, because they know that you'll keep paying, you'll do whatever, you'll give up your whole life for your kids. So they're going to try to bleed you of all your resources, so you can't even afford to fight anymore.
Yeah. And I was blackballed as a reporter from the entire state. After I got done reporting on Bath Iron Works, I couldn't get if I got a job, I was soon let go for no reason. So they pushed me into poverty and homelessness, and they just come at you. And that was just the beginning. That was the worst part. But then the directed energy weapons started, very severe. The voice to skull, the gang stalking, the cyber hacking, and the directed energy weapons were the worst. I think they almost killed me with those, the radio, and that, that has gone on. And, it can't, if you get a job, they just can get into any system they want and do anything, whether they hijack your check or they spread a rumor and so when I didn't kill myself after family court, that's when they started with the weapons, and that continues to this day. I'm almost 70. People must be like, how is she even laughing? It's because I heal myself every single day. I have to
laugh, or otherwise you're just going to cry forever.
Exactly. I have to. And, that was my mother's nature too. She had an incredible spirit, whatever they did to her, she could always find some beauty in something, or a little, whether it was a flower or a joke, her spirit was so powerful. But I will say they did get her in the end. They just destroyed her. And my relationship was never really healed with her completely. But so I just have to, and I use the love of Mother Earth and flower essences and Reiki. And, in the shamanic world, you can see you're completely surrounded by love if you access those realms. There's realms of beings that just love us, the power animals and the flower divas and the tree spirits. And so that was my salvation. and it still is. I rejected, Western medicine almost 100%. And part of that was my Christian Science upbringing. I knew that you didn't have to have doctors. And I saw the flaws in Christian Science, but it also gave me certain strengths and beliefs. But also I know that through shamanism, a lot of disease is an entity, and you can get, if you get the entity out of your energy field, it's not necessarily going to enter your physical body. So I just have many other ways, and I did not trust. Oh my God, I didn't. I had a nephew that was taken and never released. 50 years now. He was put in McLean, and they said because of acid and pot. He was 16, and I just they're not going to get me. They are not going to get me. So I never, ever. I didn't want anyone to diagnose me. My father tried to get me diagnosed. I mean, isn't it obvious what's wrong with me? But, they can't take responsibility that you're catatonic because you don't have your mother. And what's wrong with her? That's what,
and you were tortured as a child.
Yeah, it's like Princess Diana's father told her when she was old, she said, you were catatonic after the custody. You sat at the top of the stairs and you wouldn't eat or sleep, and you just sat there. And I'm like, oh, and you didn't, and I'm thinking, and you didn't do anything. You didn't let her see your mother. These people are like, oh yeah, the kids are being destroyed. There's too bad there's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, something wrong with the kid. I can't imagine what. Even
so
you
finally got me to this Freudian psychiatrist, Dr. Snell. He's probably dead by now. He's all he wanted to talk about was my sex life with my boyfriend and give me Valium. So I didn't take it. I would never take it. I hid it, pretended I was taking it, but I wouldn't take it because I just knew. Yeah, that was Freud. He was a Freudian. Oh. He was this sat in a big leather chair with a corncob pipe, our typical memory of the 1960s and 70s Freudian psychiatrists. Yeah, they said this stepmother was abusing me in every way possible almost. And there's something wrong with her. We have to send her to a psychiatrist. Maybe they can figure out what's wrong with her.
It's horrible. It's so
I'm glad I ended up laughing if we're getting towards the end.
Me too. And one thing I wanted to ask you, a lot of parents do and will go through what you have to some degree. Even if it's not by their choice, their abusive spouse may force them into court. What advice would you give to any parent on any level if they're thinking about taking their abuser to court over their children, or if their abuser takes them to court over the children? Do you have any guidance that you'd give to these innocent parents that might not know about this?
Yeah. And you use the word innocent, and that's what it is. You can't imagine that you're stepping into hell. You think you're stepping into where people are going to think logically, and you're going to show them this piece of paper, and you're going to show them evidence, and they're going to, oh, we're not going to let kids with them. It's the opposite. They're going to do the opposite. If possible, do not step foot into a courtroom right now. They are run by Freemasons. They are run by child traffickers. Do not speak to a therapist. Do not speak to a guardian ad litem. Don't speak to anyone affiliated with court, because even if you're like an angel and your partner is the devil incarnate, they're going to twist it. They're going to retract information. But once they have some information, they have information to twist. Yes. I know a girl in Maine. She's actually, she's been a client, and she had an abusive partner, and she intuitively knew not to go to court, because the courts, and it's been difficult, but she's been able to stay with her kids, protect them to a certain degree. And she has managed this partner so that they're relatively safe. I mean, she has to watch herself. It's a tricky road, but you're basically jumping into a shark tank if you go to court right now, the way it's run by Freemason and then, the paperclip officials that were placed there. I'd like to say, you develop spiritual skills, cut ties with this abusive person, if you know any shamanic or Reiki, because it's women have spiritual skills and we can develop them. And that's the only thing that saved my children. Don't interact with the devil. But the hard part is you don't know it's the devil. You think these people are going to come in and protect your children and you, and they're not. You know, and I know I'm painting very broad strokes, but I will say for the most part, this is true. And you know it too, Emma, that the women and children especially, and I know there's some bad moms out there and good dads, but who's ever the good person, they're going to get the children away from them to traumatize the kids, get them in foster care, detention centers, stepmothers, so they can be traumatized, and then they fall through the cracks. And they tried to get my kids in detention center after that party, but I had a lawyer that went in and quickly I regained custody, and they came to me. But the stepmother and the father went berserk and tried to get them into detention centers. And, so that's, if they can't get them with a stepmother, or social services or foster care, they're going to get them away from the good parent, whatever. And young children, often they need to be with their mother. And I know there's some bad mothers, but those are the mothers that, were MK altered or satanic ritual abuse. But basically speaking, don't go to court. Don't speak. They could seem like the friendliest therapist in the world. Mine did. And I have a whole chapter about her. Destroyed us. Absolutely. And the guardians, they seem so great. They're not. Stay away. Let these systems atrophy from lack of use. No kid should, it should be a warning sign on a judge. No child under 18 allowed in here. If we don't shut down courts completely, no child should be allowed to cross that threshold, or any child influenced by any decision made in that hellhole. And it's so scary because I know at my age, I was 30, and most women oh, they're going to see what's happening and they're going to help us. And it's the opposite. No. And I was the best, I swear. I'm not just saying, I was a great mother. And everybody knew it didn't matter. They can get your kids once you get into the system. If you have money, if you're the best mother in the world, your kids adore you, they have an amazing life, you've given them everything, doesn't matter. In fact, the better the kids, the more they want them. The more beautiful, the smarter, they want those kids for trafficking. So.
And I mean, one testimony that comes to mind, there's many. You even think about people like Kathy O'Brien, who have been saying for decades that her father was caught for distributing and producing child pornography. And he was reported. Somebody reported him to authorities. And instead of arresting him, they hired him into CIA government, gave him a job to abuse children, to help dissociate them for MK Ultra, trained him more on how to abuse his own child, and then Harvard judicial immunity, so he could never be arrested for doing this. He was allowed to commit illegal crime. So you see how this has been happening for a long time, where they've given power to abusers, because these abusers are connected to so much more than just themselves. They implicate a whole chain of command that goes up very high. Yeah. You bring one down, no matter how low they are or high, a whole chain comes down with them. It's a lot easier to just bury the little single parent who's over there fighting for her life and isn't involved in all of this, isn't involved in committing the crime herself. And in that web, she's whistleblowing it. It's a lot easier to silence one parent than it is to prevent a whole pyramid from falling, And so you see over time, they've always done this. They've always worked overtime to help cover up the crime and to give perpetrators and abusers and criminals freedom to continue doing what they're doing in a controlled way, legally. And then they persecute anybody who tries to tell on them.
Yeah. And I remember Kathy O'Brien saying, part of the agreement, he went to Harvard to learn MK Ultra. He was a worm digger with a 6th grade infant, and the CIA sent him to Harvard to learn MK Ultra mind control on his children.
A man who was using his own children in pornography and distributing it was treated to a full ride at Harvard, given a job in the government, and was never arrested, always given judicial immunity to continue being a pedophile. I mean, that just shows what kind of, evil we're working with in anything involving the government, schools, court
Anything.
systems, anything.
Psychiatry,
Psychiatry.
medical. I mean, they were infiltrated, and it's right there in the, the Senate committee hearings in the 1970s when they called out MK Ultra, and they told us, the Operation Paperclip scientists and other professionals were placed in every system in our country. And so it's not a conspiracy. There's records. You can go to, Wikipedia, look up Operation Paperclip. The amount of scientists varies from 1,600 to James Rink says 50,000. Wikipedia says 1,600, but every system was taken over, and it's only grown. So, there should be no surprise that we're in deep capture right now.
100%.
And yeah, if we got to step out of these systems, because I don't know if they'll shut them down unless everybody stops using them. And yeah, they want your children for money and sex and, whatever else they can wring out of their poor little bodies and minds. And if you're in their way, look out, So,
yes.
Yeah.
And before we start wrapping up, I just want to commend you. It's horrific what you've went through, but instead of conforming and doing what the court wanted, which might have offered you the opportunity to, if you did something that they asked that was wrong, you may have been afforded the opportunity to continue seeing your children if you would have been willing to shut up or bury it or plea that you were lying. You never bowed to authorities. You stood in your truth, so you could break the cycle of abuse that was done on you, and so you could help them become free of it. And you never bowed to that. And I want to commend you, because even though we can't undo generations of trauma through one action. You can't undo everything. You started the process, you got the ball rolling, and now you're close to your children who have never forgotten that love, who embody it, and they're going to continue breaking what you started with the next generations to come. And eventually down the line, there will be no trauma whatsoever in your family lineage. And that's because you had the courage to step up and say, this stops with me. I'm not bowing to authorities. I'm not going to lie at the expense of my integrity. I'm going to do the right thing, even though it's going to make me have to suffer, this consequence that's absolutely horrific, and it's going to rip my life apart. You started something amazing for your family, and I just want to commend you for that, because I can't even imagine the courage that it takes a parent to not bow and to, do everything that they want you to do, to shut up, and to just bury the wrongful crime and convictions that you were telling them. You never did that, and it made you suffer, and it's going to help your lineage become free of the chains and the suffering that you had to endure as a child. So I just want to commend you for that, and I'd love to have you back on. There's so much more to talk about, including your healing journey and the work that you're doing. But I wanted to just give you some time. You do have some websites, you have your own podcast, you have books. I want to give you just an opportunity to talk about some of the things that you do, and to share where people can connect with you and learn about it and support you and watch your podcast and buy your books and all that fun stuff.
Okay. My podcast is my name, Jane Celia Hatch. I also, I do healing work. I do shamanic healing work, long distance, and once in a while in person if I have a reference, which includes soul retrieval, depossession. I can do clearings on houses and land. I do remote view. I'm doing remote view for people who are looking into their SSP background. Yep, there I am. And there's some of my friends. And what else am I'm writing a book. I'm writing the book about Princess Diana and Elizabeth Wallace. I'm sure Elizabeth Wallace would come on. And yeah, I have a master's thesis on there. I actually went back and got a master's degree in my 40s, I think it was, in shamanic healing and healing trauma. And so I do remote view. I do long distance healing with Reiki and shamanism. And my daughter is recreating my flower essence line as we speak. And flower essence have been an enormous help to me because they change your frequency. And I think they do subdue a lot of the remote neuromonitoring, mind control, voice to skull. They can change my frequency when they try to put me in a certain frequency. So flowers are our friends, and they are electrical, and they can uplift. And what else am I doing? Oh my gosh, I don't know.
Do you have any workshops that are active or that are coming up that you want to promote?
I've got to formulate them because I'm sort of in transition. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but I think I'm headed back east, and so I want to get set up. I'm putting them together. And some of them are going to be pretty basic. Like I'm a Reiki master. So I think I'm going to do Reiki 1, 2 and Reiki master. If people are looking for attunements, I don't know that many people that are doing them anymore, but I can make you a Reiki master. I'll probably do some basic shamanic journeying and learning to journey into the spirit world using the methods of core shamanism. I have an enormous amount of experience. I've learned from a lot of different shamans and also my own research and what I did to survive.
If people wanted to hire you, can they just do that through your website?
Yeah, I have another website my daughter just made, and it's called radiantearthmother.com, and that has links for healing. I think there's this is mine, and she just did another one because the shop wasn't working here. Now that's it. And so isn't that pretty?
It's beautiful.
My middle, the one I've been talking about, that was the Unbreakable, that's her. She made this for me. And so this Reiki, shamanic, tarot crystal. What I want her to add is remote view too. And that's a picture of me in a library on the Cape where my daughter and I were all writers. And we were having a writers group there together. And my daughter took a picture. I hope I'm not too vague. I'm going to start a TikTok. But if you could, I'm so shadow banned on Facebook. I would say go there, but I don't see anybody's stuff and they don't see mine. If you go to YouTube, that would be great, and subscribe. And also, if you want a healing and you don't want to go to the website and you just want some advice, just email me. I have 2 emails I'll leave with you.
Okay.
Because sometimes people don't want to press a button and they don't know what they're getting. And, and I generally have to talk to people first anyway. Not everybody is ready for shamanic work. So I like to make a connection and make sure that's what the person really needs. And I do have some methods I'm coming up for healing MK Ultra, which involves shamanism and Reiki. And I'm developing that. And I need to finish this book about Princess Diana and get on to some more. So is that good?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And if there's any other links, I think you have an Instagram that was listed. I think you have a Rumble channel.
Yeah, I do have Rumble. I'm completely shadow banned on Instagram. I don't think I've been on it in a year because I just let it go.
Yeah.
Nobody saw it. And, Facebook is really bad right now. Like the way the CIA works is like they get you going and then they'll drop everything. You'll be completely banned. And then you get back in, they have these weird, it's like stalking. When I first got to Santa Fe, the sky was filled with black helicopters above, but then nothing. It's like they want, wherever I first arrive somewhere, they'll start up and then they'll stop. Or, it's like, they don't want you to get a routine so you feel safe even with abuse and stalking.
Because if you're safe, then you have time to process and remember and heal and fight. Yeah. If you're constantly in trauma and you're constantly paranoid or having to look over your shoulder and not safe, you're in fight or flight, there's no time for that. That's what they want.
Yeah, and they make sure you don't go like, oh, okay, it's not Friday yet, and they're not going to do that, or it's not before 5 p.m. They mix it all up, so they make sure that you think that you never have a schedule of the abuse either, so that you can't prepare. But I'm so used to them, I kind of know the schedule of their not scheduling. Like I'm like so intuitively like connected to their disconnect that I don't even think like I like, okay, they're gonna try something today. Not because it's a schedule, but because
You're
I
kind of like
find,
intuitive to it from
yeah,
going through it for so long.
yeah. And also they're getting a little nervous because I'm rediscovering all my psionic. It's making them very nervous because I'm like, okay, I'm gonna claim it all, and I'm gonna use it.
They should be scared of you, Jane. I'm telling you, I would be scared of you if I was them. They must be the wrong woman. That is for sure.
But I'll
And
tell you, like Penny Bradley, like I've got to be ripping mad, and then I can. But I'm a very loving, compassionate person, but they can get me to that point. And now I know I have the skills, so they know that now. So a lot is like,
you're reclaiming your power. You're not living in fear of them anymore, and you're not that scared little girl that you were. You're a fierce mama bear.
The only thing they can do now is take my life and whatever,
100%. Well, like I said, I want to have you back on, and even to talk about targeting and some of the things that you've maybe done to help not prevent it, but sort of, to the preventative measures that you take knowing it's going to happen to you. I think tools like that, a lot of people do suffer from this. So I'd love to bring you on for that, to talk about some of the work that you've done and your own healing journey, and also the healing that you're doing with other people, to dive a little bit more into that. But in the meantime, I just want to thank you with all my heart for coming on today, sharing all this really vulnerable information with us, and, helping us learn about the world that we live in. And I honor you and can't wait to connect with you again. I know this is going to be a really valuable episode for everybody who's listening.
I hope so, because if you can share what you've gone through and it helps someone, it makes it worth it. And especially the children.
Yes. And so everybody listening, if you found this episode valuable, share it, please. And then please go in the show notes and connect with Jane on all her different platforms, especially YouTube, both her websites. If you guys are looking for the services she offers, hire her. It's such a good way to support survivors by helping them with their services or recommending them to people and hiring them. A lot of them are just so gifted and, are just so talented writing books and helping people and being healers. And I think it's our obligation to try to help them. The government's never going to acknowledge what they went through and help them through it like they do with a lot of other people who have experienced crime. And it's a duty of all of ours to help resource them so they can keep doing this. So I'd encourage you guys to, Christmas is coming up. Books are really great options supporting survivors for gifts, services. So think about if there's anybody in your life that could benefit from Jane's books or her services.
Yeah, especially women thinking, they're facing court or they're making decisions. The only way to get the book now, I think, is through me. So I'll leave an email. Yeah. That would be great.
That's wonderful. And they can obviously go on your websites and inquire about services and connect with you that way. She even has a free 15-minute consultation you guys can schedule with her. So again, the holidays are coming up. If you guys know anybody that could benefit, or even if you can, look into it and just, share it around and help elevate her and get her voice out there. Go subscribe to her YouTube channel and check out all of the different things that she's doing and keep up with her. Go support her. I'll have all my I'll have all my links in the show notes as well. You guys connect with me too, wherever you can. And I'm just so grateful for you guys. The show couldn't operate without all of you. Your support is a driving force. Otherwise, we would just be screaming into a black hole, all of this truth. So thank you guys just for being here and for opening up your arms and hearts to every guest on this show. We love you so much. Thank you guys for listening. God bless you all. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, Emma.